going on, guys? The Comics Kid 2099 here. Welcome to day 329 of the 365-day graphic novel review challenge. Today, I want to talk to you about Nightcrawler, Volume 2, Reborn. This is written by Chris Claremont with art by Todd Knock. This collects issues 7 through 12 of the Nightcrawler solo series from a couple of years ago. And the plot here has Nightcrawler going into battle against one of the X-Men's longtime foes, solo. He has to do this by himself with a little bit of help from Bloody Bess, one of the Crimson Pirates that he briefly fought in Volume 1. And then that fight kind of transitions into an assault on Tullamore Vosge, the alien slaver, who was hinted at in Volume 1 and is actually a character that Chris Claremont introduced in the early 2000s. And I don't like this book as much as I liked Volume 1, although there are some things here that I like quite a bit. I really like that this book took an entire issue to have Nightcrawler grieving the death of Wolverine. I thought that was a very beautiful issue. It was definitely necessary because Nightcrawler and Wolverine were really close friends. There are many times in the history of the X-Men where you get to see these two going off and drinking together and talking philosophy. They each had very different views on the world, very different religious views, but at the same time they were still really close friends. And so I really love that we got to see Nightcrawler and his thoughts on this. He's kind of going through the 5 stages, but in a very different way. And then by the end of the issue, he gets to a point that seems very classical Nightcrawler, but it doesn't seem too easy that he got to that point. I really love that issue. And then the middle chunk of this book, I like it quite a bit too. It calls back to a scene that takes place roughly around the time of the Mutant Massacre, maybe a little bit before the Mutant Massacre, where Nightcrawler was training in the Danger Room and Wolverine was trying to give him some pointers on fighting, and then he gets to use those tips that Wolverine taught him to take on the X-Men, who have been taken over by this villain that he fights. And I guess I'll go ahead and tell you who it is. It's a little bit of a spoiler because it's kind of an end of the issue reveal here, but Nightcrawler gets to fight the Shadow King. And I do think that this is a little problematic because the Shadow King has always been a huge threat for the X-Men. Like, this is a character that would take, like, a seriously experienced telepath to fight, and then Nightcrawler is able to do it on his own. Now, I do like that because Nightcrawler was in heaven and now he's back on Earth, that gives him a little bit of telepathic immunity against the Shadow King. I think that's kind of a clever idea, and I wish we could have seen more of that in play with the character of Nightcrawler after this series, because this series ended with issue 12, but maybe we'll get to see more of that in another X-Men series on down the line. I'm not really sure. But I really do like that idea. Unfortunately, I don't think that it works that Nightcrawler is able to fight the Shadow King on his own. I understand this is a solo X-Men book, so you don't want a whole bunch of X-Men coming in here and kind of overshadowing the main character. But I do think that this is such a huge villain that it doesn't really make a lot of logistical sense for Nightcrawler to be able to fight this guy on his own. I thought that was just a little bit unbelievable. Maybe that won't be as much of a problem for you if you're not a huge X-Men fan, but at the same time, I ask myself, are there any people who are not huge X-Men fans who are reading a Nightcrawler book? I don't think that there are people out there who just love the character of Nightcrawler but don't read a whole lot of X-Men as a team book. I think that if you are reading this book, chances are you are a big X-Men fan, so it probably is going to bother you as much as it bothered me that they kind of depowered the Shadow King a little bit and almost made him seem like he wasn't that much of a threat. This fight lasted like 3 issues, I think, so it's not like they downplayed him to the level of the Circus of Crime or anything like that, but I feel like the Shadow King is a threat that all of the X-Men would take like 12 to 24 issues to deal with. It's something that was a huge deal in the late 80s X-Men comics, and I feel like here he's defeated too easily. But he is leaps and bounds ahead of the other villain of this book, who is Tullamore Vosge, and I've talked a little bit about this character. He was hinted at in Volume 1. He was actually introduced in the early 2000s before Grant Morrison's new X-Men run started, and he is an alien slaver. He goes across different dimensions, kidnapping people who could fetch him a pretty penny on the slaving market, and that's an interesting idea. Unfortunately, this character is not interesting. Basically, he looks like kind of a racist caricature depiction of kind of someone from India. The way that they draw him, he kind of looks a little bit like the Shadow King did in his first appearance, now that I think of it, but he has blue skin. It's really weird the way that they draw this character, and he's part of an alien race. There's many of them. I'm pretty sure that there was an alien of this species species in the New Mutants comics of the 1980s. So this goes back even further beyond the first appearance of Tullamore Vosge. But I like the idea of an alien slave ring that Nightcrawler and a couple of his students have to go and bust. I think that's a cool idea. Unfortunately, I just don't care about the character of Tullamore Vosge, and they're acting like once they kidnap him and deal with him somehow, they don't actually explain how they deal with him, but they're acting like once they deal with him, this entire ring and this entire operation will just fall apart. And I just don't see how that's going to happen, because there's a whole bunch of these guys. It's not just Tullamore Vosge. But also, I feel like if you're not familiar with this character, you're not going to care about him that much. I know about him. I've seen him in other X-Men comics, Extreme X-Men by Chris Claremont, the Uncanny X-Men comics from right before the new X-Men started in early 2000s. Basically, if Chris Claremont wrote an X-Men comic, there's like a 50-50 chance that Tullamore Vosge is going to appear. That's not a diss on Chris Claremont. He has his characters that he really loves using that nobody else cares about, and Tullamore Vosge is one of those characters. It turns out I also don't care about this character. I wish that there was a little bit something more there other than he deals in slavery across the universe. That's basically all there is to this character. I like this book okay, but it doesn't work for me as well as Volume 1 did. I can kind of see why this ended, but unfortunately I feel like a lot of times whenever you give an X-Man a solo book and that X-Man is not Wolverine, the book is not going to last very long. I saw this happen with the Cyclops ongoing series that lasted about 12 issues. You had a Storm ongoing series that lasted about that long. Nightcrawler, this one lasted 12 issues. Unfortunately, these books don't seem to have much legs, but I really do like some of the stuff that Claremont and Nock are doing here, and I would like to see some of that dealt with in some of the team books that use the character of Nightcrawler. For example, Nightcrawler has this really weird love interest in the character of Bloody Bess, who is one of the Crimson Pirates that he briefly fought in Volume 1. I like this character, and I like this team-up, but I do wish that if they were going to try and do kind of a romantic angle with this character in Nightcrawler, if they could have just slowed it down a little bit. Now, that would have meant that we wouldn't have gotten to have seen any of it in this volume, that we would have had to have waited and seen it in another book that uses Nightcrawler, but I really feel like the romantic angle that they're trying to push here is way too forced. It doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. Nightcrawler just lost his longtime girlfriend Amanda in the previous volume, and already he's kissed this character Bloody Bess like 2 or 3 times in this volume. At one point he's talking about how he's not just flirting with her in a cutesy fun little way, he actually has genuine feelings for this character, and I don't understand why. He just met this girl, and he's helped her, she's helped him, but I don't think that he should be like in love with her at this point. I feel like it's way too early. I wish that this series could have gone on a little longer, and then maybe we could have stretched this out a little bit more so that this relationship could organically happen at a slower pace. But otherwise, I felt like this relationship was a little weird. I would have liked to have seen it if we could have had more of it and kind of get to see why these two like each other, other than she just comes in and calls him cutie, and then he kisses her a couple of times, and then he talks about how he has a bond with her that's just as strong as his bond with Amanda. I don't think so. So this book, it's not terrible. I did enjoy it, but not as much as Volume 1. There are just a few things here that kept this from being a truly great book. So those are my thoughts on Nightcrawler Volume 2. I hope that you guys liked this video, and if you did, be sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe, and I will be back tomorrow with a different video. In the meantime, you guys have a great rest of the day. Catch you later.